They call your friends toxic and demand more of your time. Why does your partner's love feel so much like social imprisonment? This is the dark psychological paradox of the social isolation tactic, a move that ensures you have no one left to validate your reality.
This question right here, it gets to the absolute heart of it. It's that jarring feeling, right? The conflict between what they're saying, I love you so much I want you all to myself, and what you're actually feeling, which is this cold sense of confinement. You have to understand, this tactic isn't really about love. It's a strategic move, a calculated play to dismantle your entire support system, piece by piece, until their voice is the only one you hear. It's all about eliminating any outside perspective that could challenge their control.
So to really get how this works, we're going to follow a clear roadmap. We'll kick things off by exploring that core conflict, the paradox of possession, before we actually define the isolation blueprint itself. Then, we'll break down the step-by-step mechanism of devaluation and containment, get into the manipulator's motive, and then, and this is the most important part, we'll shift to your defense and how to unlock that cage. All right, let's start with that central paradox. You know, this tactic is so incredibly effective because it disguises control as this intense, passionate devotion. A demand to skip your friend's birthday for a special night just for us. Well, that doesn't immediately set off alarm bells, does it? It can feel romantic. But when it becomes a pattern, those romantic gestures start to feel a lot more like the bars of a cage. And that's the emotional and psychological space we're exploring today.
So how does this pattern go from these one-off romantic gestures to a full-blown cage? Well, that brings us to the blueprint itself. And let's be really clear here, we are not talking about a bunch of random, jealous arguments. We're talking about a deliberate, systematic strategy. It's a core piece of what experts call coercive control. It's a calculated campaign designed to methodically shrink your world.
The key word here is systematic. This stuff isn't accidental. It's a slow, gradual erosion of all your connections. It starts really small, a subtle comment here, a little guilt trip there. See, the manipulator is playing the long game. The end goal is to engineer a situation where you become completely reliant on them, not just for love or affection, but for your entire sense of self and, well, reality.
But why? What's the end game here? It really just boils down to two things: absolute control and what's known as supply security. Just think of supply as a constant need for validation, attention, and emotional energy. Someone with narcissistic traits needs this to function, kind of like a car needs gas. By cutting you off from everyone else, the manipulator makes sure they are the absolute center of your universe, making you their primary, uninterrupted source of that supply.
And this right here reveals the manipulator's greatest fear, which also happens to be your greatest defense: reality testing. I mean, imagine you have a really weird, unsettling argument with your partner. Your first instinct is probably to call a friend or your mom and say, "Hey, this just happened. Am I crazy?" That simple act, that's reality testing. Your friend, your anchor to the outside world, can say, "No, you're not overreacting. That is not okay." And that is precisely the feedback loop the manipulator has to destroy.
So, how do they destroy it? They use a very specific toolkit. Criticizing your loved ones isn't just a simple, I don't really like your brother. It's, your brother is so negative. Don't you see how he just brings you down? They manufacture conflicts, often by using triangulation to create these little misunderstandings between you and your support system. They might start monitoring your phone, demanding to see your texts to make sure you're not talking about them. And of course, they demand all your free time, framing it as this deep desire for closeness when it's really about limiting your chances to connect with anyone else.
Okay, now that we know the tools, let's look at how the cage is actually built. We're going to break down the precise, step-by-step mechanism that makes this whole thing so devastatingly effective. This is how that psychological cage gets constructed and locked, often before you even realize what's happening.
The process almost always unfolds in 3 clear stages. It starts with the devaluation of your support network. Once your trust in them is shaken, it leads straight to stage 2, psychological containment, where your world shrinks to include only the manipulator. And this, logically, results in the final and most devastating stage, total dependency. Let's dig into each one.
Devaluation starts by poisoning the well. A smear campaign is like a war fought on 2 fronts. The manipulator will go to your friends and say you're struggling or unstable, basically discrediting you ahead of time. At the same time, they're telling you that your friends are secretly judging you, or that your family doesn't really have your best interests at heart. The whole point is to make you doubt the very people you would normally run to for help.
The other major tool here is triangulation. This is a classic manipulation tactic.
It might sound complex, but it's really simple. It's a manipulator saying something like, you know, your best friend told me she's worried you're being way too sensitive lately. Now, whether that was actually said or not, or just twisted out of context, it plants a seed of doubt and hurt. It creates this tiny crack in your relationships that the manipulator can then force wider and wider over time. It makes you feel like you can't trust anyone but them.
And once your network is devalued, you hit this critical turning point, a state of psychological containment. The manipulator works hard to create this intense us-against-the-world feeling. They'll say things like, "Nobody understands our connection," or "Your family just doesn't get what we have." It feels special, but what you're actually hearing is the sound of the cage door locking. Your ability to reality test is now completely outsourced to the one person who has a vested interest in distorting it.
So we've seen the how. Now let's switch gears to the why. I mean, what is driving all of this behavior? And maybe just as important, why does the target of this abuse so often go along with it? This is really about the conflicting psychologies of control versus appeasement.
Okay, so on the manipulator side, you have ego fusion, which is basically an inability to see you as a separate person with your own life and relationships. They need to be the center of your world to feel secure. And then there's impunity. By isolating you, they guarantee that if and when you try to speak out, you have no credible witnesses. On the other side of it, the target's main motivation is simply anxiety reduction. It is absolutely exhausting to constantly fight for your right to see your own friends. It's often just easier to give in, to avoid the rage, the silent treatment, or the endless guilt tripping. You comply to keep the peace, and you end up mistaking this suffocating possessiveness for passionate love.
All right, let's pivot from analysis to empowerment, because understanding the blueprint is the first step, but knowing how to defend yourself against it, that's everything. This section is all about building and maintaining your reality anchors, the lifelines that will keep you grounded.
So this is the essential question we have to answer, right? If the entire strategy is designed to warp your reality and just erase your perspective, how in the world do you fight back? How do you hold on to your own mind when someone is actively trying to overwrite it? Well, the answer is actually simpler and way more powerful than you might think.
There are two core defenses, two non-negotiable rules for your own psychological safety. First, you have to learn to identify the devaluation of other people for what it truly is. And second, you have to proactively enforce what we're going to call the independent contact rule.
Let's really focus on step one. This requires a mental shift. You have to stop seeing their constant criticism of your loved ones as them just being protective or having high standards. You need to see the pattern. One negative comment? Okay, that could be an opinion, but a relentless, consistent stream of criticism aimed at every single important person in your life, that is not an opinion. That is a strategy. You have to start treating that pattern as a massive red flag of a deliberate isolation attempt. And this brings us to the most critical defense of all, establishing an external reality anchor. This is not just about casual chats. This is a conscious strategy. It means you choose at least one trusted person, a friend, a sibling, a therapist, and you commit to regular, private contact with them. And in these conversations, you don't just vent. You fact-check your reality. You say, "This happened, he said this, then he did this, tell me what you see." This person is your anchor in the storm of gaslighting. They are your objective source.
And that brings us to our final section, unlocking the cage. We've dissected the blueprint, we've understood the motives, and we've established the defense. Now, let's bring it all home to light up the path back to independence.
So, what's the final takeaway? Remember this: the social isolation tactic is a deliberate blueprint designed to do one thing: eliminate your witnesses. It's a strategy to make sure that when the mask finally slips, there's no one left in the audience to see it, no one left to back you up and say, "I saw it too." The pattern is insidious, but it's clear once you see it. It starts with the devaluation of your network, planting these seeds of distrust against the very people who love and support you. This forces you into that state of psychological containment, where you become completely dependent on the abuser's version of reality because it's the only one you have left. You're trapped in their feedback loop, where their voice becomes the only one that matters. But awareness breaks that loop. By learning to identify that steady pattern of devaluation, you see the bars of the cage for exactly what they are. And by rigorously enforcing the independent contact rule, you are actively maintaining your external reality anchor. You're making a choice to prioritize your support network over the temporary ease of just giving in. You are holding on to the key, because in the end, your independence is the key that unlocks your cage.